welcome back. Good morning. This is Morning Prime. It's a beautiful Monday morning, a little bit hazy on the outside, but of course we welcome the showers of blessings because the place is just so brown. We really need lots of water, not too much to, you know what I mean. We don't want too much flooding and stuff like that, but enough to get us green again. It is time now for me to introduce, and I think they're very important persons, Alana Wheeler. She is the Deputy Director of the Counter-Trafficking Unit here in Trinidad and Tobago, and Jerome Ramdula, who is the Senior Immigration Officer attached to the Counter-Trafficking Unit. Good morning to you. Thank you so much. I feel as though I'm kind of separated from you guys. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning. Alana, who and what is the Counter-Trafficking Unit, and does it fall under the Ministry of National Security?
Okay, well, firstly, Nicola, thank you very much for having us here this morning. We are quite pleased to be here and to share with your viewers and the rest of the country what the Ministry of National Security has been doing with respect to fighting human trafficking in Trinidad and Tobago. Human trafficking is a serious crime, and the government of Trinidad and Tobago has recognized this as a problem, and this is why in the year 2013, the Trafficking in Persons Legislation 2011 was proclaimed by the President, and the Counter-Trafficking Unit was established. The unit comprises immigration officers and police officers, and there are also we have lawyers, and we also have civilians who work in the unit. And we are the sole body mandated by the government to manage Trinidad and Tobago's response to human trafficking.
Excellent. Let me bring you into the conversation. How does the Immigration Department now fall into this counter-trafficking unit?
Well, we work closely with the counter-trafficking unit, and we get a lot of information that the police may not have access to. It facilitates the fast flow of information. We are immigration officers, and we do a lot of profiling to get intel for the police officers who do a lot of investigation on behalf of the unit.
All right, well, let me break it down for both of you. Many moons ago, human trafficking would have been, for some, a myth. And you would have persons or, even establishments saying that does not exist here in Trinidad and Tobago. How much of a reality, well, based on the fact that we have a counter-trafficking unit, that says it all, but how much does human trafficking affect Trinidad and Tobago? And if it does affect Trinidad and Tobago, what about the other smaller states?
Yes, well, Trinidad and Tobago, we are no exception from the rest of the world when it comes to human trafficking. Human trafficking exists in almost every country in the world. It is a global problem. It's often referred to as modern-day slavery, and of course, because of the nature of the crime. The reason why I suppose people would say that it doesn't exist in some countries, it's because it's a crime that is committed on the DL, right? It is a hidden crime, but it's a crime that reaps in large profits. I think the last global report, which would have been an ILO report, indicated that it reaps in over $100 million per year in profits. Right, so we can see why it's extremely profitable. It's not as risky as the other types of international crimes, and it is also a crime that is committed in secret and in hiding. And hence the reason you would find that there are some persons or countries who might be in denial that the crime exists. It does exist. Trinidad and Tobago, we work very closely with our neighbors. We work closely with the Venezuelan government, the Colombian government, and also in the other islands. But most of the persons who we rescue from trafficking Latin American women.
Okay. Jerome, definition of human trafficking. Let's just break it down for those persons who are looking on at this point.
In the simplest form, it's modern-day slavery. It's the exploitation of one human being by another. That's the simplest form, so that you might have somebody being forced to do work, no matter what type of work, if it's domestic servitude, prostitution, or labor on a farm. You're not being paid. Your rights as a normal human being for food, shelter, or even clothing, you no longer have that right. So it's just a definition. You'll take your mind back to slavery. It's basically a modern form. It's very hidden. And that makes it a little difficult for us to see.
Do individuals or those victims of human trafficking, would you say that they would have consented to human trafficking? Most of the times they don't know. Are they taken from their home country to another home country, to another country forcefully? And, you say modern day slavery, but what about those who are in Trinidad and Tobago? Does that apply as well?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we would want to do is to diffuse a myth that many persons have about human trafficking. Human trafficking is not kidnapping necessarily. And I know most of us, we're familiar with the movie Taken, and we're familiar with these movies where persons are kidnapped and taken to another country, and then they are forced into engaging in sexual exploitation or some type of prostitution. What we have found in Trinidad and Tobago, we have not found cases where persons are kidnapped. What we have found is there are persons who come to Trinidad through deception. Right? So yes, in a sense, there is some form of consent, but there is consent to come and work. However, there is some deception and there is some fraud and there is some debt bondage with respect to that person coming into Trinidad. I would give you an example. We have a case of labor exploitation where some ads were placed in the home country, and the person from Trinidad went to that country to interview persons to work in an alleged business in Trinidad doing accounting. And they arranged the airfare for them, they brought them to Trinidad, they arranged for their accommodation, and when they got here, it was when they discovered that they had to engage in very hard labor, and it was not working in business and accounting. They ended up doing something else. Right? And the wages that were promised to them is not wages that was actually paid to them. Their passports were also kept from them, and the person who brought them allowed the passport to expire. Well, not the passport, allowed their stamp, their entry stamp to expire, which meant that now the person has a hold on them. Right? Because when a victim ends up in a situation like that, if they go to immigration, what's going to happen to them? Right? In their minds, they would be deported or would be placed in IDC. So, of course, there is that fear that comes into the person, and the trafficker holds these things over victims. So I would say, yes, sometimes there is consent. In the case of sexual exploitation, we have persons entering the country through the unofficial borders. We have persons entering the country through official borders, whether it is the airport or through the seaports. But again, you have a situation where a promise was made to them before they arrived, and when they arrived, they realized, well, it's a different arrangement. And of course, the persons who are hosting them here would hold them to ransom, basically. So it is about deception, it's about lies, it's about exploiting the vulnerability of someone. And vulnerable persons are not necessarily persons who are poor. Vulnerable persons are just persons who could be naive about what really goes on in Trinidad. For example, some of who for sexual exploitation we've rescued, they would have been told that prostitution is legal in Trinidad, right? In their home countries, prostitution is legal. So when they come here and they end up being forced into prostitution, they are then told, well, what you're doing is illegal, so who are you going to report it to? Right? So the person is now forced and obliged to continue providing that service against their will. So it's a wide range of things that can happen. We have had victims who are university students, university graduates, very intelligent. We have had mature women like yourself, Nicola. We have had young ones like in their 20s. We have had men, and we have had women. So anyone can be exploited.
Fall prey to this. Jerome, given what Alana would have just said, and from an immigration standpoint, what are some of the red flags? Okay, fine. These individuals, the victims, they've been wheeled in. So they're on their way to Trinidad and Tobago. Clearly, they're more than likely coming here via airline. So when they get into Trinidad and Tobago, what are some of the red flags, though? I mean, how do they actually pass through the system? Are there any, what observations are made? That there should be some form of profiling, as you say, that would make you feel, okay, this particular individual is here not for positive reasons.
Well, first of all, as the Deputy Director said, persons who enter the country legally and illegally. Persons who would enter the country legally, they would represent themselves to the immigration officer, and based on the entry requirements, they would either be landed or refused entry. When they are landed, they go to their place of work. Yeah. What we would discover is that they don't have their passport. For example, their employer would say, I will get an extension for you. So immediately they take that passport away from them, giving the person the hope that they're going to get some kind of immigration status. They are thinking that, but that's not going to happen. Where they stay, the place they stay, for example, when you discover where you go to a brothel or you go to a home, where they are being stayed is not normal. What is not normal for us is more like a prison. So those are the indicators. And the interviews by the immigration officers, if they go to any place, they would interview. And they would themselves would get the indicators of if